What do you need?
Get to the roof of the building on Worth and Lafayette.
What's the plan?
It's gonna be hours before the telecom network's back up, so we're gonna create our own network.
Not listening. We gotta turn it up a notch. Ow! He hates water. His shoulder's already wet.
What is going on, everybody? So, Marvel Spider-Man 2 finally released on Steam. We didn't wait too long until the PC version released, but it's here, and there seems to be a lot of issues with this game in the PC gaming community. And I've recently tested out Marvel Spider-Man 2 for a couple hours, and I can't omit that this game is borderline playable at times, depending on what kind of settings you're using. Now, I started off with 900p because I feel like 900p is the best balance between quality and performance. I don't like 720p because that's when you can see the thicker, jagged lines or the sort of visual glitches that you get from FSR with lower resolution. FSR 3.1 was created to give us higher resolution with lower settings with that lower resolution. So when you set it to 900p, that's like the best of both worlds. So I mainly set it to 900p. And at first, the game did crash a lot. So far, it crashed 3 times for me. And that's only because I had the settings at default, which was on high at 1080p with FSR 3.1 turned on to quality and without frame generation enabled. So I initially switched the settings to IGTI, which is Insomniac's in-game engine upscaler, which you can use to get a decent amount of FPS. But for Marvel Spider-Man 2, that doesn't really work as well as it did for the first one. So I ended up just going to FSR 3.1 and bit the bullet and turned on frame generation, and that seemed to work a lot better. But as you can see in the opening scene, I had the upscaler set to IGTI instead, and I managed to get around 25 to 30 FPS at turbo mode. The game did not run very well, and I tried frame generation. It seems like the main reason why Marvel Spider-Man 2 isn't working properly is mainly because of that gimmick that PlayStation 5 had ingrained in it at the time of development for Marvel Spider-Man 2, and that is the quick loading feature. And this is mainly a feature that takes advantage of SSDs and can enable faster loading. In fact, 20 times faster than an SD card at the very least. So I am playing this on a PNY SD card that's meant for cameras. I think it's a really low performance, which is like 100 megabits per second, which is very low. I'm going to try to install a later version of this game later on to see how well it works with faster SD cards. But so far, I actually managed to get this game to work properly with low to medium settings. I initially set the settings to medium, and then I put a bunch of other settings to low, like shadows, ambient occlusion, and of course I turned on frame generation, which managed to give me more than 60 FPS, and that's in the city area at the beginning when you're trying to rescue those people from Sandman. So there are building structures missing and streets removed without cars running through it, and so far it's running at over 60 FPS, and I'm pretty impressed by that, especially because of how many bad things I've heard about this game. But those crazy stutters and the model replacements and the model disappearances with the sound desyncing, that's mainly because of the shader cache compiling and the game loading while you're actually playing. I mean, as you can see, there's a scene where Miles gets flung across the entire city and they have to load the city details, but it's stuttering around and basically playing at 6 FPS at the very most because it has to load the game off of this slow SD card. So if you're playing this on a ROG Ally or Steam Deck or any other handheld, make sure you have a very high quality SD card as fast as SanDisk's Extreme series SD cards, which goes, I believe, 180 megabits or more per second, which is kind of high, but you need a higher performing SD card, and I didn't bring that to the table. I just used one of my extra SD cards that I had laying around for Marvel Spider-Man 2 because I expected it to be bad. Now, without the SD card issue, yes, this game seems like it has a lot wrong with it from the beginning. There are models that just contort and do the T-pose, and that's a programming issue. That's not a loading issue, but for some instances, the models straight up disappear, and that's more of a loading issue. Sometimes it doesn't load up all of the resources in time for the scene. And with high-speed action scenes like the very beginning of Marvel Spider-Man 2, the SD card just does not work and the game just loads over and over again. And what started as a 30-second scene ended up being around 2 minutes with all the stuttering. But I am officially going to wait until a new update arrives, which improves the performance and loading times and all of that, so they can optimize everything as well as possible, and I'll report back as soon as I play the better version of Marvel Spider-Man 2. But for now, I actually like the performance in some cases, but others, it's definitely blatantly unplayable. But this game, I call it borderline playable because for the most part it is kind of unplayable until it is. And the fact that I was able to get it running at more than 60 FPS is pretty impressive, and I had the resolution set to 900p with mostly low settings. And of course the game isn't going to look as good, so I put most of the settings personally for me at medium so I can see all of the textures and exactly how the scene was supposed to play out. For the most part, a lot of PC ports of PlayStation games start off with kind of medium settings on the base PlayStation 4 or 5, and the PC brings it up to a new level. I feel like Marvel Spider-Man 2 definitely looks a lot better on the PC, of course, than it does on the PlayStation 5, but if I were to start anywhere with the graphics, it would be medium, and that would probably be closer to what we're getting on the PlayStation 5. But yeah, Marvel Spider-Man 2 is kind of horrible on PC and doesn't run very well, but there are a lot of variables to consider here, like the fact that you're probably using an SD card because you're playing on something like a Steam Deck, which I heard it runs okay with, but for the most part you're probably going to play on something like a 3060 and up. So I think for those people it'll still stutter because of all of the terrible optimization that Insomniac or whatever third-party company is working with them. So I would definitely say wait for a few updates. The first update is probably just going to address the models, which is the most embarrassing, and then the second and third updates are most likely going to fix everything else. So I would wait about 2 weeks to a month. That's usually how long it takes to fix minor bugs, but with Marvel Spider-Man 2 I would give it up to 6 months to fix this thing because it is just a tragedy at times. And yeah, I give this a compatibility rating of C-. At times it's actually decent to play, but for the most part you have a negative experience with it. And let's just see what happens in the next couple months. But yeah guys, thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you think about Marvel Spider-Man 2 in the comments below. I hope you have a good one. Later.
Guess he wasn't happy to reconnect.
Yeah, he's not really the nostalgic type.
Let me go, or I'll kill you.
He's not listening. We gotta turn it up a notch.